At 26 years old, the family that had abandoned me 16 years ago suddenly reappeared in my life. This unexpected reunion sparked a series of emotions and reactions that made me question my own identity as if I was a different person entirely. As the eldest daughter, I grew up in a seemingly happy family with two siblings, one 3 years younger and the other 5 years my junior. We shared typical family experiences, cooking meals together, watching movies, and playing games. We were close-knit until my father lost his job when I was 9, unfairly blamed for things he hadn't done, and unfairly dismissed. This left my mother, who was working in a school, struggling to provide for us all. They decided it would be best if I lived with my grandparents until they were back on their feet. Initially, the idea seemed reasonable, and I embraced the change. That summer, I stayed on my grandparents' farm, caring for animals and enjoying the countryside. Little did I know, this temporary separation would turn into a lifelong ordeal. When school was set to resume, my parents assured me they were working on arranging a new home. I stayed a few extra days with my grandparents, waiting for their call. However, the promised days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Every attempt to contact my parents was met with unanswered calls and empty promises. Feeling abandoned and betrayed, I pleaded with my grandparents to provide me with an education. They enrolled me in a local public school, but adjusting to the new environment took time. Despite the challenges, I focused on my studies, determined to escape my grandparents' farm and find my parents. The lack of concern from those around me intensified my resolve. Everything changed when I overheard a conversation between my grandmother and my mother on the phone. The hushed tones in the kitchen revealed the truth. My mother was alive. My hope was rekindled, but the mystery of my parents' disappearance only deepened, leaving me with more questions than ever before. We were discussing my progress in school and various aspects of my life, and hearing her voice stirred up a whirlwind of emotions within me. I couldn't contain my feelings, and before I could stop myself, I called out to her. The moment my voice reached the other end, silence fell. Frantically, I screamed and cried into the phone, hoping that if I shook it hard enough, her voice would echo through the receiver. Grandma emerged from the kitchen, her face a mix of concern and frustration, instructing me to go to my room. I unleashed my anger on her, demanding to know why she had hidden my mother from me and why she refused to divulge any information despite my pleas. Grandma remained steadfast in her silence, leaving me to accept the painful reality that my parents had essentially abandoned me. Shortly after that heartbreaking phone call, my grandparents sent me to live with a distant aunt, a 5-hour drive away from their farm. I often wondered why my parents had chosen to send me away, but I never received a satisfactory answer. My aunt, my mother's cousin, turned out to be a compassionate and understanding soul. She embraced me with open arms, and when I questioned her about my parents, she admitted she didn't have any answers. Her sincerity was palpable, and I chose to believe her. From the moment I moved in with my aunt at the age of 13, she became my rock. Whenever I struggled with my emotions, she was there to guide me, offering solace and understanding. She even encouraged me to seek therapy, a decision that initially left me hesitant, but eventually proved immensely beneficial. My aunt validated my feelings, something my grandparents had never done, and provided the support I desperately needed. By the time I finished high school, my aunt had become the most significant person in my life, filling the void left by my absent parents. She supported me through my journey to becoming a veterinary doctor, following in her footsteps. At 21, I approached her with adoption papers, wanting her to be my legal parent. With her wholehearted agreement, I finally found the stability and love I had craved for so long. Having completed my degree, I now work as an intern in a hospital, striving to gain valuable experience. My career path has led me to move into a new apartment away from the familiarity of my aunt's home. Despite the physical distance, I still visit her whenever I can. 2 days ago, on my day off, I was relaxing at home when the doorbell rang. Anticipating a delivery, I opened the door only to find my estranged family standing there, my mom, dad, and youngest brother. They appeared both unfamiliar and yet hauntingly recognizable. Stunned into silence, I couldn't find the words to express my emotions. They handed me an envelope containing a letter from my grandparents. According to the letter, I had allegedly run away from their home, refusing to maintain contact, causing them immense emotional distress. They demanded I pay for my brother's education, leveraging my newfound status as a doctor, threatening legal action if I refused. The situation made no sense to me. How could I be blamed for running away when I had been sent away by my grandparents? Why should I be financially responsible for my brother's education when I had no say in the matter? The demands felt unjust, leaving me bewildered and conflicted about how to respond. I staunchly refused to help them, insisting they leave my premises. When they persisted, I called the cops. They claimed to be my parents, but I stood my ground, stating that legally I was my aunt's daughter and provided her name. The authorities contacted her, and she confirmed my status, resulting in my family receiving a warning about trespassing and harassment. Since then, I've been bombarded with hurtful messages on social media from accounts owned by my family, labeling me as heartless. I confided in my aunt about everything, and although she understood my actions, she questioned whether I did the right thing. In the midst of this turmoil, my parents showed up at my workplace, causing a scene. Hospital security intervened, calling the police and escorting them off the premises. I couldn't fathom why my family, absent for so long, suddenly wanted to be a part of my life. The emotional toll weighed heavily on me. My therapist suggested talking to them, but I resisted. Eventually, I agreed to meet them in the presence of my aunt. Their explanation was disheartening. They sent me to my grandparents due to financial struggles, thinking it would be easier with one less mouth to feed. When circumstances improved, they couldn't afford to bring me back. Now, with their savings depleted, they wanted me to support them and pay for my brother's needs. They admitted fabricating the threat of legal action, hoping to guilt me into compliance. Each word shattered my heart, but I stood firm. I reminded them of my legal detachment and threatened legal action if they ever bothered me again at home or work. Despite their pleas for forgiveness, I walked away, my heart hardened against them. My therapist suggested I might be struggling to empathize, but the truth was, I felt nothing for them. If I could, I'd erase them from my memory without a second thought. Since my last update, my family has ceased reaching out to me. On the other hand, I have completed my internship and am considering another residency program before I sit for the NAV. I hold on to hope that my future will be all right. Sometimes, I won't deny it, I wish I had a better relationship with my parents. Nevertheless, I am content with having my aunt as my sole parent. She proves to be a far superior mother than the other one. I know they abandoned you, lied to you, and left you with your grandparents. You owe them nothing. You are only giving them what they gave you. They abandoned you. I don't understand why they thought you wouldn't do the same. My sister-in-law, a 26-year-old woman, and I, a 29-year-old woman, have always had a complicated relationship. I thought she had matured enough to leave me alone, but apparently she couldn't resist causing drama. Our issue started when I began dating my husband. We met while he was helping her move. We struck up a conversation at a local bar and have been together ever since despite her happiness. My sister-in-law never liked me. She once told me her brother never gets serious with anyone, so I shouldn't get my hopes up. Mentally prepared for heartbreak, even though I really liked her brother, 6 years later, we are still going strong, and he is undoubtedly my favorite person in the world. The rest of his family, including my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and every other family member I've met, have been nothing but nice to me. So it baffles me why my sister-in-law seems to hate me so much. 2 years ago, during our wedding, she created a huge fuss. I didn't want her as my bridesmaid due to her consistent cold and condescending behavior toward me. However, she threw a tantrum and tried to emotionally manipulate my husband against me. To avoid more drama, I made her a bridesmaid, yet she showed up in a white floral dress angering everyone. My in-laws forced her to change, threatening to exclude her from family events if she didn't comply. She apologized afterward, and I thought she had moved past her immature behavior. Clearly, I was wrong. Things took a turn when I found out I was pregnant with my first child. I was thrilled and couldn't wait to share the news. While everyone else was excited, my sister-in-law's behavior was different. She didn't seem happy for us, and consistently managed to make the moment about herself. During a family event where we announced our pregnancy, she quickly diverted the conversation to her own experiences as a single mother, emphasizing how difficult it was for her to go through pregnancy alone and suggesting that I was lucky. As my due date approached, my sister-in-law offered to host a baby shower for me. Initially, I was grateful and excited about the celebration with my family and friends. However, my excitement turned to suspicion when she insisted on hosting the event at a venue 12,000 miles away from where we lived. She claimed it was a surprise setup at a luxurious venue owned by her friend, and we wouldn't have to pay for anything. Despite her explanation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. When I shared my concerns with my husband, he assured me that his sister was simply trying to do something special for us and that I might be overthinking it. He even rescheduled vital meetings so we could attend the supposed baby shower. We flew there with my parents as my in-laws couldn't attend due to being out of the country. Upon arriving at the location, a lavish resort, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The decorations were pink and blue, but there were unfamiliar faces present. To my shock, there was another pregnant couple, and the woman was wearing the same white dress given to me by my sister-in-law. It became apparent that my sister-in-law had tricked us into attending her friend's baby shower, making me feel humiliated and overshadowed. Feeling utterly embarrassed and upset, I left the party in tears. Once I understood the situation, my husband confronted his sister, leading to her making excuses and attempting to deflect blame. He informed his parents, who were equally shocked and angry. In response to her behavior, they decided to cut her off financially. They had been supporting her financially for years, but after her actions, they withdrew their financial aid and decided she should fend for herself. They even warned her not to show up until she learned to act responsibly. Although my sister-in-law blames me for her misfortune, I maintain that I didn't ask my in-laws to take any action. This was entirely her own doing. While she tries to manipulate me, portraying herself as a single mom, I can't help but believe she deserves the consequences of her actions. Despite her attempts to guilt-trip me, I stand firm in my belief that she brought this upon herself. My sister-in-law is by no means destitute. She won't be left penniless with her son due to this situation. She just needs to adjust her lifestyle and figure out how to manage her boutique independently. Moreover, if my in-laws genuinely believed their grandchild was in jeopardy, they would step in. I'm confident they won't hold a grudge for long. Although they might not fund her boutique, they'll likely assist her with general expenses once she acknowledges her error and apologizes to me, rather than attacking me for her perceived misfortunes. My husband firmly stands by my side, assuring me that I never have to forgive my sister-in-law or engage with her again. He apologized for not intervening earlier and taking stronger measures to keep her away from me. My kind mother-in-law is planning a genuine baby shower for me, promising a delightful celebration where I can focus on the joy of our upcoming child, forgetting about my sister-in-law's antics. However, my sister-in-law crashed my baby shower despite being uninvited. On the day of the event, everything seemed perfect. My mother-in-law had beautifully decorated her backyard, and delicious food and drinks were served. We were happily chatting with our friends and family, opening gifts people had generously brought for us. But when my sister-in-law arrived, having found out about the party through social media, she exploded into a furious tirade. She created a scene, shouting that her parents didn't financially support her, but had no issue throwing a lavish party for me, someone she deemed unworthy of such attention. At that point, my mother-in-law had had enough. She promptly escorted my sister-in-law out of the garden, apologizing to the guests for the disturbance. After the event, my in-laws apologized to me multiple times, suggesting I obtain a restraining order against my sister-in-law. While I hesitate to take such drastic measures, we have decided to keep all news about the baby off social media to prevent her from stalking us. The whole situation is insane, and it baffles me how jealous and immature my sister-in-law can be. She managed to ruin not just one, but 2 baby showers with her antics. I must add that my in-laws initially weren't supportive during her pregnancy because she was having a child out of wedlock, which clashed with their traditional beliefs. They did come around after the baby was born, but it appears my sister-in-law still harbors resentment. I haven't heard from her since the baby shower, and my in-laws have expressed their intention to cut her off permanently due to her embarrassing behavior in front of so many people. Frankly, I've reached a point where I don't care anymore. I just want this ordeal to be over so I can focus on myself and my baby. It's astonishing how entitled and childish she can be, sabotaging such a beautiful event. She disrespected not only me but also her friend, showcasing her true colors as a deeply flawed and immature individual. I don't intend to waste another thought on her.
My name is Sarah Miller, and I'm 55 years old. I've spent the last 25 years working at a financial consulting firm in Los Angeles. This company has been my second home, and I've dedicated my life to serving our clients. Over the years, I've built strong relationships with 35 clients, offering them personalized financial strategies. But recently, everything changed. A new president took over the company after the former president, a man who knew and appreciated my work, fell ill. This new leader, however, didn't take the time to understand the internal dynamics or the value I brought to the team. Instead, he listened to Jack and Lisa, 2 colleagues who had their own agenda. Jack, who is 45, became the head of the finance department about 4 months ago. Since his promotion, he changed drastically. He used to be polite and respectful, but now his tone is filled with condescension and complaints. Lisa, his 32-year-old assistant, seemed to follow his lead. They both targeted me, accusing me of exploiting overtime and dragging down the department's performance. It all started subtly. Jack would leave a pile of client files on my desk at the end of the day, with impossible deadlines. Lisa would make snide remarks about my efficiency, always within earshot of others. They were relentless, and it was clear they wanted me gone. They believed cutting labor costs and eliminating overtime pay were essential, and they saw me as an obstacle. One particularly grueling evening, after Jack had left yet another month's worth of client files on my desk, I confronted him. "Jack, these files have deadlines this month. How am I supposed to manage all this alone?" He shrugged, not even bothering to look up from packing his things. "Figure it out, Sarah. It's your job. I'm heading out." Lisa, who had been eavesdropping, laughed as she followed him out. "Good luck, Sarah," she said mockingly. The weight of the files in front of me was nothing compared to the weight of their constant harassment. Despite the challenges, I continued to manage my duties. I couldn't afford to show weakness. My clients depended on me, and I had always taken pride in my ability to deliver exceptional service. But the stress was taking its toll. Jack and Lisa's criticisms became more frequent, and their accusations of me inflating overtime hours grew louder. The breaking point came when the new president called me into his office. Jack and Lisa were already there, wearing smug expressions. The president looked at me with a mix of confusion and frustration. "Sarah, I've been informed that your overtime hours are significantly higher than anyone else's in the department. While others have around 16 hours, you've exceeded 82. Can you explain this?" I took a deep breath, feeling the sting of betrayal. "Mr. President, the overtime is because I've been handling not only my workload, but also the additional tasks Jack and Lisa have been offloading onto me. I've always worked hard to meet our clients' needs, but this recent increase is due to their actions, not mine. Jack interrupted, shaking his head. That's not true. You're the one exploiting the system, Sarah. We all work hard, but you seem to think you deserve special treatment. Lisa nodded in agreement. Exactly. Your constant overtime is dragging down our performance. The president sighed deeply. I understand your concerns, Sarah, but without concrete evidence, I can't justify this level of overtime. We need to cut costs, and this is becoming a significant issue. I'm afraid I have to ask for your resignation. My heart sank. After 25 years of dedication, it had come to this. I could see Jack and Lisa's satisfaction as the president delivered his decision. Fine, I said quietly. I'll resign by the end of the month. As I left the office, Lisa couldn't resist a parting shot. Thanks for quitting, Sarah, she sneered. I maintained a silent, steady gaze, not giving her the satisfaction of a reaction. This company had been my life, and their betrayal cut deep. But I wasn't going to let them see me crumble. I would leave with my head held high, and they would soon realize the consequences of their actions. The days following my resignation were some of the hardest of my life. Leaving a place I had devoted 25 years to was a painful process. I spent my last days at the company tying up loose ends, creating detailed handover documents for all my 35 clients, and scheduling farewells. Many of my clients were shocked to hear of my departure, and it broke my heart to see their disappointment. Some expressed concerns about the future of their financial strategies without me. As I packed up my office on the final day, Jack and Lisa seemed unusually cheerful. Their plan had worked. They had pushed me out to cut costs and eliminate my supposed overtime exploitation. However, their celebration was premature. A week after my resignation, I finally had a moment to relax at home. I thought I had left the chaos behind, but my phone started ringing incessantly. When I saw the company's number on the screen, I hesitated. After a few moments, I reluctantly answered. Hello, this is Sarah, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah, this is the president. We need you to come back to the office immediately, he said, his voice strained with panic. I couldn't help but feel a bit of satisfaction. I'm sorry, but I've already completed my resignation process, I replied calmly. Please, Sarah. We're facing a crisis. Our clients are halting their transactions, and we don't know how to handle it. They're asking for you, he pleaded. Despite my desire to leave the company behind, I felt a sense of responsibility towards my clients. I agreed to go back, at least to see what was happening. When I arrived at the office, the atmosphere was chaotic. The once orderly environment was now filled with frantic employees and ringing phones. Jack and Lisa were waiting for me in the lobby, their faces pale and haggard. It was a stark contrast to their usual smug expressions. What's going on? I asked, genuinely curious. Jack glared at me, frustration evident in his eyes. Since you left, we've been bombarded with calls to stop transactions. Not just from your clients, but from prospective companies we were planning to introduce, he said, his voice shaking. Lisa, looking equally distressed, added, We've tried everything, but they insist on speaking with you. What did you do? I shook my head, confused. I haven't done anything, but I can guess why this is happening. I could see the fear in their eyes, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of an explanation just yet. Take me to the president. In the president's office, the tension was palpable. Jack and Lisa followed me in, their accusatory glares still fixed on me. The president looked up, relief washing over his face when he saw me. Sarah, thank you for coming. Can you explain what's going on? He asked. I took a deep breath. Our clients don't need us to manage their finances. There are plenty of firms that offer cheaper services. They stayed with us because of the personalized strategies I provided. They valued the relationship we built over the years. Jack scoffed. That's nonsense. We have a manual for a reason. It's efficient and practical. I looked at him, my patience wearing thin. It might be efficient for you, but our clients valued the tailored approach I provided. That's why they're leaving. They trusted me. The president sighed deeply, understanding dawning on his face. Jack, Lisa, I've received numerous complaints about your conduct. It seems you've been offloading your work onto subordinates, inflating expense claims, and engaging in an inappropriate relationship. Jack and Lisa's faces turned white. That's not true. Lisa protested. We've been working hard to improve the department. The president shook his head. The evidence says otherwise. I have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately. Their desperate pleas fell on deaf ears. As they were escorted out, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. They had pushed me out, thinking they were saving the company, but their actions had brought it to the brink of disaster. After the chaos settled, the president turned to me. Sarah, I made a mistake in letting you go. The company needs you. Would you consider coming back? I hesitated. The betrayal I had felt was still fresh, but I also felt a sense of duty towards the clients who had supported me. I need some time to think about it, I replied. As I left the office, I knew that my decision would not be easy. Returning meant facing the same environment that had caused me so much pain, but it also meant continuing to help the clients I cared about. I would have to weigh my options carefully, and whatever decision I made would shape the next chapter of my life. Returning home after that chaotic day, I couldn't shake off the president's plea for me to come back. I spent the night pondering my options. The betrayal I felt from Jack and Lisa still stung, but I also felt a deep sense of responsibility towards my clients. They had shown loyalty to me, and I didn't want to let them down. The next morning, after a restless night, I decided to meet with a few of my closest clients to hear their thoughts. I called up Mr. Anderson, one of my longest-standing clients, and arranged a meeting at a nearby cafe. When I arrived, Mr. Anderson greeted me warmly. Sarah, it's good to see you. I've been worried about the company since you left. What happened? I took a deep breath and explained the situation, from the harassment by Jack and Lisa to the president asking for my resignation. Mr. Anderson listened intently, his expression growing serious. Sarah, you've always been the backbone of our financial planning. Without you, the company has lost its personal touch. That's why many of us decided to halt our transactions. We trusted you, not the company. His words hit me hard. It wasn't just about the job, it was about the relationships I had built over the years. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Your support means a lot to me, I said, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. After speaking with a few more clients who echoed Mr. Anderson's sentiments, I realized that my decision had to be about more than just returning to the same toxic environment. I needed to ensure that the company understood the value of personalized service and that the toxic behavior of people like Jack and Lisa wouldn't be tolerated again. I went back to the president's office the next day, feeling more resolute. He looked relieved to see me. Sarah, have you made a decision? Yes, I said firmly. But there need to be some changes. First, I want assurances that the toxic behavior that drove me out won't be allowed to continue. Second, we need to shift our focus back to personalized client service. That's what sets us apart, and that's why our clients stay with us. The president nodded, listening carefully. I understand, Sarah. I admit that I made a mistake by listening to Jack and Lisa without understanding the full picture. I'll make sure that we address these issues. We need you back. With his assurance, I agreed to return, but under the condition that we would work together to rebuild the company's reputation and reinforce a culture of respect and dedication. Upon my return, I was greeted with a mixture of relief and apprehension from my colleagues. They had seen the chaos that ensued after my departure and realized the impact I had on the company. The president held a meeting, addressing the entire staff about the changes that were going to be implemented, emphasizing the importance of respect, dedication, and personalized client service. As I settled back into my role, I noticed a significant shift in the office atmosphere. The toxic tension that had been prevalent during Jack and Lisa's time was replaced with a renewed sense of teamwork and purpose. People were more supportive, and there was a collective effort to restore the company's standing with our clients. However, rebuilding trust with the clients was not an overnight task. I spent countless hours meeting with them, assuring them that the personalized service they valued would continue. Many were relieved to see me back and appreciated the efforts the company was making to address past issues. It was a challenging period, but their support and trust made it worthwhile. One evening, as I was wrapping up a long day, the president walked into my office. "Sarah, I wanted to thank you personally. The changes you've implemented have made a significant difference. Our clients are starting to trust us again, and the staff morale is improving." I smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "Thank you. It wasn't easy, but I'm glad to see things getting better." As I looked around my office, I realized how much had changed since that first day when I announced my resignation. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been a testament to the value of resilience and dedication. The company was on a path to recovery, and I was proud to be a part of it. But I knew the story wasn't over yet. There were still challenges ahead, and the true test would be maintaining the positive changes in the long run. For now, though, I felt a sense of fulfillment and anticipation for what the future held. As the weeks turned into months, the company gradually stabilized. Our clients began to return, reassured by the changes we had implemented. The atmosphere in the office continued to improve, and there was a genuine sense of camaraderie among the staff. The president kept his promise, ensuring that the toxic behaviors of the past would not be repeated. It seemed like we were on the right track. Despite the positive changes, I felt a lingering unease. The betrayal I had experienced had left a deep scar, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my time at the company was drawing to a natural close. My dedication to my clients had never wavered, but my passion for the job had been irrevocably altered. One afternoon, while reviewing some client files, I received a call from an old friend, Rachel, who owned a small financial consultancy firm. We hadn't spoken in years, but she had heard about the turmoil at my company and wanted to catch up. During our conversation, she mentioned needing help with a growing client base and suggested I join her firm. The idea intrigued me. Rachel's firm was much smaller and more personal, and it seemed like an opportunity to continue doing what I loved without the burden of corporate politics. After our call, I spent the evening considering her offer. It felt like the perfect chance to start fresh and regain my passion for financial consulting. The next morning, I arranged a meeting with the president. As I sat down in his office, he looked at me with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Sarah, what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about my future here. While I appreciate the changes we've made and the support I've received, I believe it's time for me to move on. I've received an offer to join a friend's consultancy firm, and I think it's the right step for me." The president seemed surprised but nodded understandingly. "I can't say I'm not disappointed, but I understand your decision. You've been invaluable to us, and I'm grateful for everything you've done." We discussed my transition plan to ensure a smooth handover of my responsibilities. The president assured me that they would continue to uphold the values and changes we had implemented. I felt a sense of relief and excitement about this new chapter in my life. During my final days at the company, I made sure to meet with each of my clients, explaining my decision and introducing them to their new consultants. Many of them were sad to see me go but understood and supported my choice. I left knowing they were in good hands. On my last day, the office held a small farewell party. As I looked around at my colleagues and friends, I felt a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation. This place had been my home for 25 years, and leaving wasn't easy. But I knew it was the right decision. Rachel welcomed me warmly into her firm, and I quickly settled into the new environment. The work was fulfilling, and I appreciated the close-knit, supportive atmosphere. For the first time in years, I felt truly content and inspired. Looking back on my journey, I realized that the challenges I faced had only made me stronger. The betrayal and harassment had been painful, but they had also led me to a place where I could thrive. I found satisfaction in knowing that I had stood up against unfair treatment and emerged resilient. As I moved forward in my new role, I remained dedicated to providing personalized, high-quality service to my clients. The experience had taught me the value of integrity, dedication, and the importance of finding fulfillment outside a toxic environment. My second life had just begun, and I eagerly anticipated the journey ahead.
Hello, my name is Phoebe, and I'm a 35-year-old woman. Today I want to tell you about one of the worst moments of my life that ended up bringing about a positive change in my life, but through the most painful way. First, let me tell you a little about my family. I grew up with no siblings and only my two parents. My family was pretty wealthy, and my parents made it a point to make sure that I enjoyed every part of life growing up. The biggest contributor to that was my dad. My dad and I were very close. We were partners in crime, as my mom used to call us, whenever we played harmless pranks on her. So it was devastating when we found out that Dad had been diagnosed with cancer. Thankfully, they had detected it pretty early on. We started the treatments right away. My dad went into remission, and we thought that life would go back to normal after that. I was in college at that time, and it was around then that I had met my now ex-husband, Ryan. We started dating after one of our mutual friends introduced us to each other. Ryan was genuinely a kind and caring guy. He made me laugh and was in general very empathetic. He was the perfect guy for me. If there was one flaw in our relationship, it was Ryan's mother, Amanda. Amanda figured I was rich because, well, she did one Google search and found my information, and for some reason she decided that I was snobby. She actively made jokes at my expense. I didn't mind it, because I knew that these jokes were only coming from a very bitter side of her. But I drew the line with her when she made fun of my dad getting cancer. Ryan and I chose to go low contact with her after that. We got married a couple of years after we graduated, and we were living well. Then disaster struck my life once again. After a full 9 years, Dad's cancer came back, and this time it was even more aggressive. We put him under treatment, but they weren't working. I was running back and forth from the hospital to work. I needed to give Mom time away from Dad as well. Ryan wasn't really there, but I wasn't too focused on that at that moment. Everything was happening so fast, and eventually Dad slipped into a coma. He then went into a vegetative state, which is how he remained for the next 6 months. We tried to hold on to him, but eventually we knew it was time to let go. I had been by my dad's bedside when he passed away. It was a heartbreaking moment for me to watch his life support be pulled away from him. I was a crying mess, and so was my mom. Ryan had held me as I cried, but he didn't show much emotion. I didn't think much of it because, for starters, I was too upset to worry about how Ryan was reacting to my father's death, and also because I didn't think that everyone dealt with grief the same way. So maybe that was Ryan's way of expressing his grief. Anyways, the next few days were filled with filling out the paperwork and arranging the funeral and wake. It was a trying time because I had so many things to do, along with dealing with the grief of loss. My mother was too overcome by grief to even do anything else but sit in her room and cry. I tried to be there as best I could for her, but I needed to get things done. Thankfully, her sister was there to comfort her while I was busy doing other things. During this time, though, when I most needed Ryan, he began to grow distant. I would try to find comfort in him, but he was always too tired or busy. Now, keeping in mind, both of us were still working, but I was doing more than just work. I tried to be understanding of his tiredness, but I found it really hard considering I was still shaken up by my father's death. I approached him about it one day. "Can we talk?" "Yeah, what is it?" "You seem off." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you seem really distant and uncaring." "You're going to have to be clearer than that, Phoebe." "Well, I've been struggling for a while now with Dad's death and all, but every time I try to talk to you about it, you just shut off. I don't know how you expect me to react to that. Just tell me if I've done something to you." "You were more considerate when my dog died. You were kind and caring. But when it comes to my father, your dad dying is very different from your dog dying. I don't know how to help you out about it. I don't expect you to comfort me with words or anything. Maybe just hold me or just listen to me. That itself would be more than enough." "I don't think that will help you out. You need more than that, you know." "What?" "I'm feeling really tired. Can we not do this right now?" He did it again. I mean, I did not know why I expected anything else from him. I felt so hurt and upset at what he was doing, but I couldn't seem to wrap my head around why he was doing it. I decided to just leave him, because I had much more important things weighing on my mind. Ryan chose to not attend the funeral, and while I was upset, I was also angry. I didn't have time to feel it, though, because I was busy interacting with other family members and friends. My mother did ask where Ryan was, but I told her to leave it alone. I stayed with my mom for another few days after the funeral was done. I needed to be with someone who could understand and comfort me. Plus, I got to be that person for my mother, too. We spent our time watching all of Dad's favorite movies and eating his favorite foods. Ryan would call me once a day, and I would give him one-word replies. I hoped that he would understand just how mad I was at him. Even if he did understand it, he never acted any differently. He just continued to go on as if nothing was wrong. During these days, I also got what Dad had willed to me. He had quite a few assets in his name, and I got about 60% of it while my mom got the rest. Don't get me wrong. Mom got the house and the rest of the money that Dad had, so she was still pretty set for the rest of her life. Dad just thought that I would benefit from a little more, considering I was younger. I didn't tell Ryan about it because I didn't see why I needed to tell him when I was still upset with him. When I finally got back home, I did it without telling Ryan about it. I walked in and noticed that Ryan's mother, Amanda, was there. I didn't know why she was there, considering Ryan and I had agreed to have barely any contact with her. I almost walked into the room when I heard them talking, so I just spoke to Julia, and she told me that Phoebe left her house and will be here shortly. I don't know how I'm going to deal with her emotional messiness. Look, you just have to put up with it for a little while longer. We have a bigger plan than we need to focus on. I know, but it's just so hard to pretend like I care about her emotions, Ryan. Julia told me that Phoebe knows about her share of the inheritance. Hasn't she got it yet? The paperwork is still processing, so it will be a while, but it's a lot of money. How big are we talking here? Like life-changing money or just make life more comfortable money? Hell yeah! How are we going to go about getting that money into our hands? Well, you just have to be very emotionally available to her. You need to make her feel secure and calm, And when you've done that, you can slowly ask her what her bank details are, just so you can check if the money got credited into her account. I don't think she'll give up her bank details that easily, Mom. She's grieving right now. She doesn't have the same reasoning skills that she had before. All she will see is her husband trying to lighten the load of her worries, and she'll give it up. You know what? You're right. Knowing how stupid she can be when she's emotional, I just know that this plan will work. Once you have access to her account, withdraw the money, then deposit it into my account. I'm so excited. I can't believe someone as boring as her gets to have that much money. Life can be unfair in the worst ways possible, my dear. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, which was why midway through their conversation, I started recording everything they said. I felt sick and like I was about to throw up. I heard Amanda and Ryan laughing at me, and I didn't understand why Ryan suddenly viewed me that way. Or was it not suddenly? Had he only been with me because he knew that I came from money? The thought was too sickening for me to keep thinking, so I quietly left the house. I made sure to make it look like I never entered to begin with. I drove back to my mother's place because I could think of nowhere else to go. I felt numb emotionally. I mean, that would have been the only appropriate reaction to finding out that my husband viewed me as a pathetic, over-emotional loser whom he could easily steal from. You know, the worst part about that plan was that they were right. I would have very easily just given him my bank details, and that was not because I would have been too overcome with grief, but because I loved and trusted Ryan enough to know that he would never have done me wrong. If I hadn't overheard their conversation, I would have fallen into their stupid trap. And that pain would have been even worse because not only would Ryan have betrayed me, but he would have also stolen the only thing that Dad left for me. I wanted to feel angry, but at that point, I was so used to the anger that I had been keeping inside against Ryan that it didn't seem to make a difference. When I reached my mother's place, she walked over to me with concern. "Honey, where'd you go?" "Nowhere. I just got off the phone with Amanda." "Why were you talking to Amanda?" "She called me a while ago, too, to ask when you were coming back home, and she got worried when you took so long to get back." I almost flew into a panic, too. "Are you okay?" "Why did Amanda call you about me going back home and not Ryan?" "You know, I did think that was odd, but at the same time, even though you haven't told me anything, I know that there's something happening between the both of you that has been going on for a while. I haven't pried, because I hoped you'd come and talk to me about it." "Yeah, well, Ryan had been acting very weird with me ever since Dad died." "Oh, weird how?" "I don't really know how to describe it without seeming childish, but he was very distant and cold. Like he wouldn't comfort me when he saw me cry. Instead, he'd just leave the room whenever I tried to talk to him. He was always conveniently tired and didn't want to talk." "Oh, honey, that's horrible, sure, but I know that he behaved that way because he thinks of me as an over-emotional loser." "Phoebe, how can you say that?" "Ryan's your husband. He can't possibly think of you in that way." "Maybe you should talk to—" "I don't want to talk to him, honey. You can't be stubborn about this. If you are, you'll ruin your marriage. No, I don't need to talk to him about anything because he's the one that ruined our marriage, huh?" "What do you mean?" I played the recording back to my mother and watched as her face turned from confusion to pure horror and disgust. She asked me if the recording was real, and I explained how I had reached back home just after she got off the call with Amanda. I happened to hear them speak, and I recorded it because I couldn't believe my ears. My mother was understandably furious. She gave me the biggest hug and tried her best to make me feel better, but I was so emotionally drained that I couldn't reciprocate any of her emotions or even appreciate her actions. I just asked her if I could crash for the day and if we could deal with everything the next day, and she assured me that we could. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of texts from Ryan asking me where I was. I didn't want to reply to him, but I knew that I couldn't let him know that I found out about his plans. I asked my mom if she had told Ryan or Amanda anything about me being with her, and she told me that she had gone to sleep right after me. So I quickly texted Ryan that I was back at my mother's place because she ended up not feeling too well last night, and I turned around and went back to her. After that, Mom and I ate breakfast in silence. Thankfully, it was the weekend, which meant that we could laze around in bed all day. Mom went out to buy some groceries, which were chocolates, ice cream, cookies, and everything else that heartbreak requires. We lounged in bed all day and rewatched Dad's favorite movies for the 6th time. As evening drew nearer, my mom was losing her patience with me. I could see it in the way that her legs began to bounce, and the fact that she was quite literally biting her nails. I knew that she wanted to talk about how I could deal with my situation. And if I was being honest, so did I. So I paused the movie and turned to her. "All right, stop biting your nails. Let's talk about what happened last night." Finally, I had some thoughts. But first, I needed to know how you feel. Well, I don't feel great. It hurts to think that the man I loved didn't love me back the same way. Do you think that he never loved you? Or that this was a recent shift? Gosh, I hope it was a recent shift. I can't imagine him having stayed for years just because he wanted my money. We went through way too much for that. And who do you think is to blame for this sudden shift? Then, obviously, his mother. I don't know why, but that woman has a thing against me from the start. We were supposed to have no contact with her, but then... Well, what do you think is the best course of action to take here? If I'm being completely honest, I really don't know. A part of me wants to confront him, but another part wants to just... not. Okay. Well, what if you don't confront him, but instead play along with his and Amanda's little scheme? You mean like trick them into believing that their plan is working? Yes, and what you could do is also record everything they say and do. I say you should bug the entire house with cameras and microphones. Nothing either of them do or say can get away from you. But what do I do with all that? Oh, honey, you leave him. You deserve someone who's at least 1,000,000 times better than him. You're right, I'll do that. With that, we decided to put our plan into motion. The first thing we did the next morning was go to our local Home Depot and buy the hidden cameras. These cameras come equipped with the audio feature, so I didn't have to worry about anything else. We went over to our place when Ryan was at work so we could set everything up. We left things as they were and found a divorce lawyer to file my divorce and represent me. I got back home again only after Ryan got back from work. He seemed surprised to see me, but I just told him that my mother was feeling all better, so I came back home. To Mo, Ryan had a sudden change in character. Suddenly, he was patiently waiting to hear me talk about my feelings. I only felt anger towards him for doing that. I knew that the change was only because he wanted to steal from me. However, I kept my cool and played my part. Although instead of pouring my heart out to him, I made sure to tell him that I was just too tired and drained to think of anything. This went on for a week, and Ryan was very affectionate and caring. He made me all my favorite foods every day and even took on all the chores. I wish that all of that was genuine, especially because when he did those things for me, sometimes I would look into his eyes and I couldn't understand how a man so cruel could be so nice. I would not see any hatred or annoyance in his eyes, and that only made me more bitter. Finally, he asked me for my bank details one night. "Hey, darling, how are you feeling?" I really don't want to talk about it. You know it's not healthy that you keep pushing talking about how you feel away. I'm here for you. You know that, right? Yeah, of course I know that. Maybe I should get into therapy, though. I don't think you'd be able to help me out with the immense amount of grief I'm dealing with. I fully support that. Anything to see you happy, darling. But how are we going to afford a therapist? I mean, this is the nicest way. But aren't they, pretty expensive? Yeah, but Dad left me some money, and when it hits my bank, I can get therapy. Oh, I bet that's a lot of paperwork. You know what? Why don't you let me handle all of that? Why? I don't mind doing the paperwork. Shh. It'll only put more stress on you. I just want my love to rest and heal right now. Why don't you let me take care of things? At least as an apology for how I behaved before. All right, I guess. I gave him my bank information, except I gave him the wrong PIN. You see, when he did eventually try to get into my account, his wrong attempts would prompt me to get a message from my bank that would also serve as proof of his attempted theft. After that, it was only a matter of waiting. It took Ryan another 4 days before he attempted to withdraw the money that had been deposited in my account. He also decided to log into my bank through the bank app on his phone. It did not work. Next, he tried to withdraw money from the ATM. He must have tried it multiple times at work because my bank called me to inform me of the multiple attempts to withdraw money using the wrong PINs. Another thing was that Amanda, she came over to our place whenever I was at work, and Ryan was there. The two of them would talk about how their plan was taking time, and how Ryan was unable to log into the town. With everything in my hands, I acted like I was going to work one day and made my way back home once Ryan was gone. I packed up all my things and only left him the divorce papers. I also left him a note stating that if he wanted to contact me, he should do it through my lawyer. I handed over the evidence to my lawyer and let her deal with everything thereafter. Ryan, of course, tried to contact me many times, but I just blocked him. Amanda also texted me a bunch, saying things like I was ruining their lives and that I owed Ryan an apology for wasting all his time. Knowing the both of them and their greed, they contested the divorce. The both of them looked proud when I saw them in the courtroom, but that didn't last too long. After the hearing started, my lawyer presented the court with the evidence of Ryan and Amanda plotting to steal my inheritance just days after my father died. To say they looked shocked would be an understatement. Both of them looked like they had seen ghosts, while their lawyer looked angry beyond belief. The hearings lasted pretty long because Ryan tried to claim that I was financially abusing him for years because even though I come from money, I never contributed it to the household, which resulted in him having to work like a dog to survive. However, my father had made it explicitly clear to me that when I moved out of the house, whatever age it be, I was not going to get a cent from him unless I absolutely needed it. The best part was that my dad had it in writing, so I could also provide the court with that in writing. Needless to say, that made an even worse impression on Ryan. Finally, the judge ruled that because of Ryan's attempted theft, instead of paying a fine, I was to get 85% of all our joint assets. Amanda and Ryan were furious, but this time it was my turn to look smug. I walked out of that courtroom with so much pride and confidence, and I have never gotten down from that high. Ryan and Amanda called and texted me a bunch to tell me that I was insensitive and manipulative, that I ruined their lives. Ryan would sometimes throw in an apology and beg me to come back to him, but I won't ever do that. My mom and I are living pretty happily right now. Dad's death is still painful to remember, but at least it brought about a positive change in my life. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Tessa. I've always been the kind to keep my head down and work hard. It's paid off. I landed a job at a major trading company right out of college and clawed my way up from there. Life was straightforward: work, sleep, and the occasional night out with friends to blow off steam. That routine changed the night I met Lucas. It was at one of those rare outings with friends, a loud party downtown where the music pounds in your chest and you have to shout to be heard. Lucas was different, more reserved, hanging back from the crowd, nursing a beer. He had that look, like he had a story to tell but preferred to keep it to himself. We got to talking, or rather shouting, over the noise. Turns out we both shared a distaste for these kinds of loud parties, which was kind of funny considering where we were. Lucas was easy to talk to. He had this straightforward way about him that I appreciated right off the bat. Not really my scene, to be honest. He yelled over the music, a small smile playing on his lips. "Then why are you here?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Trying to keep my cousin happy. She dragged me out tonight," he admitted, rolling his eyes slightly. "Sounds like a good brother," I replied, nodding in approval. We ditched the party early, opting for a quieter bar down the street where we could actually hear each other. That night, we talked about everything from our jobs to our taste in movies. Lucas mentioned his previous marriage almost in passing. "It didn't work out. She wasn't faithful," he said simply, his voice flat. "But that's the past." His honesty caught me off guard, but it also made me respect him more. We started seeing each other regularly after that night. Things moved fast, and it wasn't long before we were talking about a future together. After Lucas and I decided to make things official, he was eager to introduce me to his mother, Susan. We planned a Sunday brunch at her place, and I remember feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. I wanted to make a good impression as we pulled up to her tidy 2-story house. Lucas turned to me with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry. It'll be fine. Just be yourself," he said, squeezing my hand. The moment we stepped inside, I was hit with the smell of bacon and eggs. The house was spotless, every item in its rightful place, which told me she probably spent the better part of the morning cleaning and preparing for this. "Lucas, my boy," Susan's voice rang out from the kitchen, followed by her appearance in the doorway. She wiped her hands on her apron as she approached us. Her gaze landed on me, and it felt like she was trying to x-ray my soul. "And you must be Tessa. Heard a lot about you. Nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Thompson," I said, extending my hand. She shook it, her grip surprisingly firm. "Call me Susan." Mrs. Thompson was my mother-in-law, and I couldn't stand her. Her blunt statement threw me off, but I laughed it off. "All right, Susan it is." We sat down at the dining table, which was meticulously set with fine china and crystal glasses, an indication of how important this meeting was to her. Susan served us, then took the seat across from me, her eyes never straying far. "So, Tessa," she started, cutting straight to the chase, "Lucas tells me you're quite the career woman. Trading, is it? Sounds like a man's world." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a jab. "Yes, it's trading, and it's for anyone who's good at it," I replied, keeping my tone light. Lucas chimed in, perhaps sensing the tension. "Tessa is one of the top traders at her firm. She's really good at what she does." "That's so." Susan's voice carried a note of skepticism. "I hope you know Lucas needs someone who's present, not stuck at the office all hours." I felt my cheeks warm up, but kept my cool. I manage my time well. Lucas and I have plenty of quality time together. Susan hummed, poking at her food. "We'll see." I remember Lucas's ex was always busy too, until she was busy with someone else. Lucas's fork clattered against his plate. "Mom, that's enough." "Oh, relax. I'm just making conversation, Susan said, waving a dismissive hand. She then turned her attention back to me. Tell me, Tessa, do you cook, or should my son expect takeout every night? I love to cook, I said, forcing a smile. Lucas can vouch for my lasagna. Lucas nodded vigorously. It's true. She makes a mean lasagna. Well, isn't that something? Susan's tone softened a fraction. Maybe you'll have to make it for me one of these days. The rest of the meal passed with small talk about the weather and Susan's garden, which she seemed more passionate about. Every now and then she'd throw in a pointed question or comment, testing my responses. It was like a verbal sparring match, and I was determined not to let my guard down. As we were leaving, Susan pulled me aside, her voice low, almost a whisper, but her words cut through the air. Listen, Tessa, my son's happiness is everything to me. I'll do whatever it takes to protect him. Remember that. I met her gaze, my voice steady. I have no intention of hurting Lucas. You have nothing to worry about. Susan studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll see, won't we? After the brunch with Susan, I thought maybe things would settle down, but I was way off. Lucas's work required him to travel a lot, which meant I was home alone often. Susan saw this as her chance to really crank up her watch over me. It started with unexpected visits. The first time it happened, I was working from my home office when I heard the doorbell. I opened the door to find Susan standing there, her face set in a stern expression that didn't promise anything good. Tessa, just in the neighborhood, she said, brushing past me into the house as if it was her own. Thought I'd drop by. I masked my annoyance with a tight smile. Nice to see you, Susan. What brings you here? Oh, just making sure everything's all right here while my son's away, she said, already wandering into the living room, eyeing everything critically. Her visits became more frequent, and each time Susan had something to say about how I kept the house. It was like living under a microscope. One day, she walked into the kitchen while I was prepping dinner and started rifling through my pantry. Just seeing what you feed my son when he's home. You know, processed foods are no good, right? She commented, holding up a box of pasta like it was evidence in a trial. But it didn't stop at home visits. I started noticing Susan around places I frequented, the grocery store, the gym, even the cafe near my work. It was getting creepy. One afternoon, I confronted her. She was coincidentally at the same grocery store as me, pushing her cart down the aisle I was in. Susan, this is the third time this week I've run into you like this. What's going on? She played innocent, a sly smile tugging at her lips. What, can't a woman do her shopping? Not at the exact same places and exact same times as her daughter-in-law consistently. What are you trying to do, Susan? Her smile faded and she leaned closer, her voice low and harsh. I'm keeping my eyes open, Tessa. You can play the perfect wife all you want, but I know about your desire to cheat on my son. Every encounter left me more frustrated and angry. It wasn't just the invasion of my privacy. It was the constant tension, the expectation of having to defend myself against imaginary accusations. Over time, Susan's eyesight had gotten worse, something about her age and her health stacking the odds against her. The doctor had given her glasses, but she hated them, said they made her feel old and irritated her nose. She'd put them on and take them off, fussing and fuming, and more often than not, she'd just leave them somewhere and forget. Because of that, she saw very poorly, which only added fuel to her naturally suspicious nature. With Lucas away on another one of his frequent business trips, I had grown accustomed to handling things on my own, including dealing with Susan's relentless scrutiny. One evening, feeling a bit cooped up and in need of a change of scenery, I made plans to meet my brother Jake for dinner. It was a casual meetup, nothing fancy, just a chance to catch up with family and unwind. I chose a little outdoor restaurant with a nice terrace that wasn't too far from where I worked. Jake arrived first, and I spotted him at a table, waving me over with a big grin. "Hey, sis," he called out as I approached, his face all bright and cheerful, the typical big brother ready to tease or share a joke. "Hey, Jake, it's been too long," I said, giving him a quick hug before sitting down across from him. We ordered some food and drinks, and the conversation flowed easily as it always did with Jake. We talked about work, family, and some of the latest movies we'd both seen. It was nice, relaxing, and exactly what I needed. As the evening wore on, we wrapped things up. Outside the restaurant, we stood up to say goodbye. I gave Jake a friendly hug, just a normal sister-brother moment. When I got home later that night, the house was dark and quiet, but as I turned on the light in the living room, I nearly jumped out of my skin. There was Susan sitting on my couch, a smug look plastered across her face and holding what looked like a digital camera. "What the hell, Susan? What are you doing in my house at this hour?" My voice was a mix of anger and shock. She rose from the couch, holding up the camera. "Gotcha," she said, her voice dripping with venomous triumph. "Got what exactly?" I snapped, my patience thinning rapidly. She thrust the camera in my face, showing a photo of Jake and me hugging. "Caught you red-handed with your lover." I rolled my eyes, tossing my keys on the table. "I was with my brother Jake. We had dinner, that's it." Susan snorted, a harsh mocking sound that made my hands clench into fists at my sides. "Sure, your brother. I know what I saw." "Oh, really? And what did you see with those failing eyes of yours?" I snapped back, my patience at its breaking point. Her face flushed with anger, and she fumbled with the camera, finally shoving it in my direction. "See for yourself." I took the camera, half expecting some blurry photo taken from a distance, but there it was, a clear shot of Jake and me mid-hug, smiling, just a brother and sister, enjoying a nice evening out. I couldn't help but laugh, which only seemed to infuriate her more. "What's so funny?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Here, look," I handed the camera back to her. "Put on your glasses, Susan. It's just me and Jake." For a moment, she hesitated, then muttering under her breath, she dug in her purse and pulled out her glasses. Slipping them on, she looked at the photo again. I watched her face change as she finally saw what was really there. "Now I think it's time you left," I said firmly, my resolve hardening. Susan looked like she wanted to argue more, but then she just nodded stiffly and headed for the door. "This isn't over," she muttered as she left. The few weeks Lucas was home felt like a dream. We were inseparable, catching up on lost time, and for a brief period, I could almost forget about the constant cloud of tension that was his mother, Susan. But like all good things, it came to an end too quickly. Soon enough, Lucas was packing his bags again for another extended business trip. I braced myself for the usual loneliness that accompanied his departures, but this time a new complication arose. Susan decided to move in. She showed up at our doorstep one afternoon, suitcase in tow, announcing her stay as if it were the most natural decision in the world. "It's for the good of the family, Tessa. I'm here to make sure you don't get into any trouble," she declared, pushing past me into the living room. I called Lucas immediately, my voice shaking with frustration. "She can't just move in here, Lucas. You need to talk to her." Lucas sighed on the other end of the line. "Tessa, please just try to get along. I don't want to fight with her about this. It's only for a few weeks." Reluctantly, I agreed, but hanging up the phone, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. This wasn't going to be easy. Susan wasted no time taking over the household. That first weekend, she followed me around, critiquing every little thing I did. "You're folding those towels all wrong," she'd say, or "You missed a spot there. Do it again." She even took over the kitchen, her worst idea yet. Due to her deteriorating eyesight, she constantly oversalted or overpeppered everything. But whenever the food turned out barely edible, she blamed me. "You must have distracted me," she'd snap, or "You're trying to sabotage my cooking." During the weekdays, her behavior grew even more suffocating. She sat in the living room, a notebook in her lap, jotting down the times I left for work and came home. Anytime I was delayed, even by traffic, she'd greet me with a sneer. "Late again? Busy day or busy boyfriend?" It was traffic, Susan, like it is for millions of people every day. I'd retort, my patience fraying at the edges. Her insinuations were relentless, and each day ended with me locking myself in the bedroom, fuming but helpless. Lucas's request echoed in my mind, keeping me from unleashing the torrent of anger I felt. A month into Susan's invasive stay at our house, I finally got the news I'd been waiting for: a promotion at work. This wasn't just any promotion. It came with the opportunity for training at our company's main branch in another city. I'd been eyeing this chance for years, a real step up in my career. When I told Lucas over the phone, his excitement for me was palpable even through the distance. "That's incredible, babe. I'm so proud of you," he enthused. "Don't worry about the time apart. It'll fly by and we'll be back together before you know it." Despite the distance and the issues with his mother, his support was unwavering. It bolstered my spirits, filled me with warmth and determination. But then there was Susan. I broke the news to her one evening, trying to keep the conversation light and straightforward. "Susan, I've been promoted. I'll need to go to another city for a while to train," I explained, hoping to sound as nonchalant as possible. Her reaction was as expected, sour and accusatory. "So you're running off to another city now? What's really there, Tessa?" "A lover," she spat, her words dripping with venom. I sighed, frustration bubbling inside. "It's for training, Susan. There's no lover." "Why is that so hard for you to believe?" She snorted, her expression twisted in disbelief. "Sure, training. Just convenient timing, isn't it? As soon as Lucas is gone, you find a reason to leave too," she accused. I shook my head, unable to hide my irritation. "Believe what you want, Susan. I'm going, and that's final." With Lucas's blessing ringing in my ears, I packed my bags that night, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of my own home. Susan's persistent mistrust and conspiracy theories had trained me, and the idea of a few weeks away felt like a breath of fresh air. Once I settled into my temporary apartment in the new city, the sense of freedom was palpable. No Susan lurking around every corner, no insinuations or bitter comments at every turn. I was doing well in training, making new connections, and actually enjoying my evenings in peace. I found myself thinking more than once how pleasant life was without Susan watching my every move. But then, one ordinary afternoon as I returned from a session, my phone pinged with a new voice message from Susan. The content of that message turned my newfound peace upside down. "Tessa, I hope you're enjoying your time with your lovers because you won't have a home to come back to. I've taken care of everything. The house is sold. Stay where you are, for all I care." Her voice, cold and triumphant, sent chills down my spine. I replayed the message, my mind racing. It couldn't be true. Lucas hadn't mentioned anything, and he owned the house. Nothing could be done without his signature. Yet the malicious glee in Susan's voice couldn't be ignored. What had she done? I called Lucas immediately, panic edging my voice, but the call went straight to voicemail. With him still on his business trip and likely in meetings or on a flight, I felt helpless, stuck in another city. The seeds of doubt Susan had planted were now sprouting relentless anxiety. As the days passed with no return call from Lucas, my mind conjured up all sorts of disastrous scenarios. Had Susan forged his signature? Was it even legally possible to sell a house like that? The questions tormented me, gnawing at my focus and sleep. Despite the turmoil, I forced myself to continue with the training. I had worked too hard to let Susan's potentially empty threats derail my progress. By the end of the training program, I was mentally exhausted, not just from the courses, but from the emotional roller coaster Susan had sent me on. I walked into the house, my mind still reeling from the chaos of the past few weeks. There in the middle of the living room stood Susan, squinting at me as if she couldn't quite make out who I was. She wasn't wearing her glasses again, which explained the unsure look on her face. But as I got closer, her expression shifted to one of smug triumph. "Welcome back, Tessa," she said, her voice dripping with a venomous cheerfulness. "I have some news for you." I dropped my bag by the door, bracing myself. "What now, Susan?" She thrust a stack of papers at me. "Here, read this. It's all settled. The house has been sold. You don't belong here anymore, or in this family for that matter." Her words were cold, calculated. Her claim was so outrageous that for a moment, I was too shocked to speak. "What are you talking about?" "Lucas would never agree to sell our house without discussing it with me first." "Oh, but he did," she replied. "And he's tired, Tessa. Tired of your endless affairs," she added, a harsh edge to her voice. I snatched the papers from her hands, my heart pounding as I flipped through them. My eyes scanned the document quickly at first, then more carefully as something caught my attention. A laugh escaped my lips, not from amusement, but from sheer disbelief. Susan looked at me, puzzled and clearly irritated. "What's so funny here?" I said, pushing the papers back into her hands. "Put on your glasses and read it aloud. Read what you've signed." Reluctantly, she fumbled for her glasses, put them on, and started reading. "This agreement made and entered into this day, by and between." Her voice faltered as she continued, the realization dawning slowly. "This isn't a sale contract. It's a loan agreement for consulting services." "Yes, Susan, that's right. You didn't sell the house. You signed up for a high-interest loan from some scam artists who took advantage of you," I clarified firmly. Susan's face went pale, her hands trembling as she held the document. "But I thought I was selling the house. There was an ad in the paper, and the man was so convincing. He said it could all be done without bothering Lucas with the details, that it was better this way," she stammered. "You thought you'd sell my house out from under me without even a real check on what you were signing," I exclaimed incredulously, anger and disbelief warring within me. Tears started streaming down her face, her earlier composure crumbling. "I just wanted to protect my son from you and your infidelities. I didn't mean for this to happen. I forgot my glasses and everything seemed so legitimate," she pleaded. I stared at her, the weight of everything she'd put me through bearing down on me. "Susan, you have gone too far this time. You need to leave now." With a heavy heart but a clear resolve, I watched as Susan packed a few belongings into her bag, still sobbing, still muttering apologies as she walked out the door. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. When Lucas returned from his business trip, I had a lot to tell him. As soon as he put down his bags, I started to unload everything that had happened, from Susan's attempted deception to the fake documents. He listened, his face growing tighter and more serious with every detail I shared. After I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, just staring at the ground. Then he looked up, his jaw set. "This is unbelievable. It's time we taught Mom a serious lesson." What she planned to do was way out of line, he said, his voice firm and angry. However, the next day, after a tearful confrontation with Susan where she pleaded ignorance and desperation, Lucas decided we needed legal advice. We consulted a lawyer to understand the full implications of what Susan had done. The lawyer was pretty clear. From a legal standpoint, your mother-in-law voluntarily took out that loan and signed the contract. She's liable for the repayment, he explained in a no-nonsense tone. Susan's face when she heard that news was something I could never forget. She had thought she could manipulate her way out of the situation, but reality hit hard. She was on the hook for a significant amount of money, and there was no easy way out. She had to find a job, and fast. Within weeks, she started working 2 shifts just to make ends meet. With Susan now occupied and no longer having time to meddle in our lives, Lucas and I finally found some peace. We decided it was a good time to take a break, to give ourselves a chance to heal and bond again after the chaos. We went to Hawaii for a second honeymoon, and it was blissful. We talked a lot about our future during those long leisurely walks along the beach. I think we're ready to think about having a baby, don't you? Lucas said one evening, the sunset casting warm glows on his face. I smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Yes, I do. Let's enjoy being us for a bit longer, and then let's go for it, I replied. Now back from Hawaii, life feels lighter, simpler. We spend our weekends planning the garden, redecorating the house, just enjoying each other's company. Lucas supports me in everything, including my career and our future family plans. We've discussed timelines, how we're going to manage our work-life balance, and how excited we are to be parents. It's a new chapter for us, one that's filled with hope and looking forward.
My name is Sophia, and my childhood was filled with the kind of privilege most people only dream about. Our house was something straight out of a magazine: spacious rooms, manicured lawn, and a pool that hosted countless summer parties. My father's business success made it all possible, and he never let us forget it. "Sophia, honey, remember that everything we have comes from hard work," my dad would say, his voice carrying that familiar mix of pride and authority. I'd nod, trying to absorb the lesson, even though at that age, I was more interested in playing with my cousin Chloe than understanding the value of money. Ah, Chloe. She was practically my sister, even though technically she was my cousin. Just a year younger than me, she was the daughter of my father's younger brother, Uncle Mark. Our families were inseparable, though the contrast in our living situations was hard to miss. "Your uncle's family needs our support," my mom would explain whenever I noticed Dad helping them out financially. "Family takes care of family." She was always the diplomatic one, smoothing over any awkward moments when Uncle Mark would accept another check from Dad. Chloe and I shared everything: clothes, secrets, dreams. We'd spend hours in my room, planning our futures. "We'll go to college together," Chloe would say, lying on my bed and staring at the ceiling. "And then we'll live in apartments next to each other, and our kids will be best friends too." When high school graduation approached, true to form, my father announced he'd pay for both our college educations. Mom stood beside him, beaming with pride as he made the announcement at our joint graduation party. "Both my girls deserve the best education possible," he declared, putting an arm around each of us. I remember how Chloe's eyes welled up with tears of gratitude, while I just smiled, taking it for granted. Looking back now, I should have noticed the signs. But back then, I was just happy to have my cousin/sister by my side as we packed our bags for college. We were going to take on the world together, two peas in a pod, never imagining that a wedding gift would eventually unravel everything we thought we knew about our perfect family. "This is going to be amazing," Chloe squealed as we decorated our dorm rooms, located conveniently across the hall from each other. "Nothing can ever come between us, right, Sophia?" "Nothing," I promised, meaning it with all my heart. God, how naive we were. How naive I was. But that's the thing about perfect families: sometimes they're perfect only because we choose not to look too closely at the cracks in the foundation. College flew by faster than I expected. Before I knew it, I was walking across the stage to receive my diploma, my family cheering from the audience. I felt on top of the world, armed with my degree. I quickly landed a job at a marketing firm. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Well, almost everything. "Dad, I've been thinking about getting my own place," I brought up one evening over dinner. I'd been browsing apartment listings online, dreaming of having my own space. "The rental market is crazy right now, and with a down payment." "Sophia," he cut me off, putting down his fork. "You're an independent woman now. You have a good job. It's time for you to earn your own living. Your mother and I gave you a great education, but now it's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet." Mom just sat there, nodding in agreement. I felt like I'd been slapped. So that's how I ended up in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, watching my savings grow at a painfully slow rate while half my paycheck went to rent. But I was determined to prove I could do it on my own. A year later, Chloe graduated. We celebrated at her favorite restaurant, and that's when she dropped her bombshell. "Jake proposed," she squealed, flashing a diamond ring. "We're getting married in 4 months." 4 months flew by in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. I threw myself into my maid of honor duties, helping Chloe pick out everything from her dress to the table settings. Despite my own housing struggles, I was genuinely happy for her. The wedding day arrived, and everything was perfect. The ceremony was beautiful, the reception elegant. I watched Chloe dance with Jake, both of them glowing with happiness. Then my father stood up to make his speech. "Chloe," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "You've been like a daughter to me all these years. Watching you grow up alongside Sophia has been one of life's greatest joys." I smiled, sipping my champagne. Standard wedding speech stuff. But then... "That's why," he continued, pulling out an envelope, "I want to give you something special. Something to start your new life together." He paused for dramatic effect. "The keys to your very own apartment." The glass nearly slipped from my hand. The room erupted in gasps and applause. Uncle Mark and Aunt Sarah were crying. Chloe rushed to hug my father, sobbing thank yous into his shoulder. "You deserve this," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I love you like my own daughter." I sat there, frozen, as relatives crowded around Chloe and Jake, congratulating them on their incredible gift. My mind was spinning. The same father who told me to stand on my own 2 feet had just handed my cousin an apartment. I gripped my champagne glass so hard I thought it might shatter. But I kept smiling. Kept playing my part. This was Chloe's day, after all. I wouldn't make a scene. I waited exactly 3 days after the wedding before I showed up at my parents' house. My hands were shaking as I rang the doorbell, but my voice was steady when Dad opened the door. "We need to talk," I said, walking past him into the familiar living room where I'd spent so many happy moments. "What's on your mind, Sophia?" He settled into his favorite armchair, looking perfectly calm, as if he hadn't just dropped a bomb on my life. "Really? You're going to pretend you don't know?" I stayed standing, too agitated to sit. "You told me to earn my own living, to stand on my own feet. But you just handed Chloe an apartment like it was nothing. Want to explain that?" Dad sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "It's different with Chloe. She doesn't have the same opportunities you do." "Different how?" "We went to the same college, got the same education, which you paid for, by the way. She comes from a poor family, Sophia. Jake's family isn't well off either. Your uncle can't afford to help them get started in life." He leaned forward. "At today's prices, they'd never be able to save enough for their own place." I let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, and I can? Half the country rents, Dad. They could have done what I'm doing, work, save, rent an apartment like normal people." "You're being mercantile," he snapped, his calm facade cracking. "This isn't about you. This is my money, and I decide how to spend it. I help your uncle's family because they need it." "Mercantile?" My voice rose. "This isn't about money, it's about fairness. How do you think it feels to watch you treat your niece better than your own daughter?" "That's enough." Mom burst into the room. I hadn't even realized she was home. "How dare you question your father's decisions? You have no right to tell him how to spend his money." "Oh, so you're okay with this?" I turned to her. "Your husband giving another woman's daughter an apartment while telling his own to struggle? Don't you take that tone with me, young lady." Mom's face was red with anger. "Your father has provided everything for you, and this is how you repay him? With jealousy and demands?" "Jealousy?" I was practically shouting now. "You think this is about jealousy? This is about respect. About treating your own child with the same consideration you show to others. Get out." Dad's voice was cold. "Until you can appreciate everything we've done for you, and apologize for this behavior, get out of my house." Gladly, I grabbed my purse. "And don't worry about doing anything else for me. I wouldn't want your charity." My eyes were burning with angry tears as I got into my car. It wasn't about the money, it never had been. It was about the double standard, about watching my father bend over backward for Chloe while telling me to toughen up. 5 years can change a lot of things. In my case, they changed almost everything. I built my career, rising through the ranks at my marketing firm to become a senior account manager. I saved money diligently, though nowhere near enough for a down payment in this insane market, and most importantly, I found Michael. He walked into my life during a client meeting. He was the creative director we were partnering with, and something just clicked. The moment he proposed, on a random Tuesday evening while we were cooking dinner together, I knew I'd finally found someone who truly put me first. The wedding planning started immediately. Our date was set for early summer, and I threw myself into it with the same determination I brought to everything else in my life. The venue was booked, the dress was chosen, and then came the hardest part, the guest list. I spent hours at my kitchen table, staring at names and relationships, though it wasn't hard to decide who wouldn't be on it. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Chloe in 5 years, not since Chloe's nasty message on Facebook. "You're just jealous, because I have a husband and an apartment while you have neither. Grow up, Sophia. Maybe if you weren't so entitled, you'd have both by now. But I guess some people just can't handle seeing others succeed." I'd blocked her after that. It was easier that way, cleaner. I built a new life, surrounded myself with people who valued me, and tried to forget about the family that had made me feel like a second-class daughter. But word travels fast in families, even broken ones. I was sitting in my apartment, reviewing floral arrangements and debating between roses and peonies, when my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen, the first time in 5 years. My heart jumped into my throat, and my hand shook as I answered. "Sophia," his voice sounded older somehow, more tired. "I hear congratulations are in order." "Who told you?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Does it matter? Why didn't you invite me to your wedding?" He paused, and I could hear the hurt in his voice. "I'm your father. I should be the one walking you down the aisle." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Really? Now you want to play the father card?" "Sophia. Actually, I'm curious," I cut him off, feeling reckless. Something about hearing his voice had unleashed all the emotions I'd kept carefully contained for 5 years. "Will you be giving me an apartment as a wedding gift? You know, like you did for Chloe?" The silence on the other end stretched out so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Look, sweetheart, business hasn't been great lately. I can give you $5,000 for the wedding. That's a generous gift. You should be grateful." $5,000. After giving Chloe a whole apartment. I felt that old familiar burn of indignation rising in my throat. Some things, it seemed, never changed. "Thanks for your generosity, Dad," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But keep your money. I don't need it." The line went dead before he could respond. I stared at my phone, my hands trembling slightly, wondering if that 5-year silence had been better than this reminder of why I'd cut contact in the first place. The notification popped up on my phone the next morning. "Robert Anderson has shared a post." My father rarely posted on social media, so seeing his name alone made my stomach clench. When I opened it, my hand started shaking. "I never thought I'd have to write something like this about my own daughter," the post began. "But Sophia has shown her true colors. She's demanding an apartment as a wedding gift, threatening not to invite me to her wedding unless I comply. The selfishness and mercenary attitude she's displaying breaks my heart. What happened to the daughter I raised?" The comments started rolling in immediately. "Aunt Linda, how ungrateful can she be? Cousin James, some people never appreciate what they have." Even people I barely knew were weighing in. "You can't demand gifts like that." What kind of daughter blackmails her own father? My fingers flew across the keyboard before I could stop myself. A matter of principle? You gave my cousin an apartment for her wedding. Your own daughter deserves the same consideration, or at least an explanation for the difference in treatment. But the comments kept coming, each one more judgmental than the last. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type, but something had snapped inside me. I opened a new post and started writing. Let me tell you all a story that's been bothering me for years, I began. It's about a father who has always treated his niece better than his own daughter. Let me list the ways. Every birthday, Chloe got lavish parties, while mine were simple family gatherings. When we went on family trips abroad, Dad always took Chloe shopping separately, buying her extras I never got. Her pocket money was consistently double mine. Dad paid for her education, which I appreciate he did for both of us. He gave her an apartment as a wedding gift, while telling me to stand on my own feet. At Chloe's wedding, she had her first dance with my father instead of her own. And you know what? The more I think about it, the more suspicious this whole situation seems. I wouldn't even be surprised if it turned out Chloe was actually my father's daughter. I hit post before I could second-guess myself. The words stared back at me from the screen. A nuclear bomb dropped into the middle of our family's carefully maintained facade. There would be no taking it back now. The aftermath of my post was nuclear. Within hours, my phone was blowing up with calls and messages from every corner of the family. Some relatives immediately announced they wouldn't be attending my wedding. Mom called first, her voice shrill with anger. How could you? Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? Your father is devastated. We raised you better than this. Dad's call came next, a stream of rage and accusations about how I was destroying the family name. You're dead to me, he spat before hanging up. Aunt Sarah's call was particularly venomous. You vindictive little bitch, she hissed. How dare you suggest? You're just jealous of my daughter's happiness. Then came Chloe's message. Congratulations on proving what a hysterical, paranoid person you've become. I feel sorry for your fiancé. He's marrying a delusional woman who invents 6 stories about her own family because she can't handle not being the center of attention. Don't worry about blocking me, I'll do it myself. I quietly blocked everyone who'd left nasty comments or messages. My wedding guest list got significantly shorter, but I told myself it was for the best. Only Uncle Mark remained silent throughout the whole ordeal, which I found oddly comforting amid the chaos. The next 2 months were a blur of wedding preparations. Michael was my rock through it all, never questioning my decision to cut off my family, supporting me as I revised seating charts and canceled place settings. Then, one rainy evening, there was a knock at my door. Uncle Mark stood there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Can I come in? He asked quietly. We need to talk. I'd never seen my uncle look so broken. He sat heavily on my couch, hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles were white. Your post, he began, about your father's treatment of Chloe, it made me start thinking. Really thinking about everything. And remembering. He told me about the early years of his marriage, how my father was always around their house. He'd drive Sarah home from work, saying it wasn't safe for her to take the bus. This was even before she was pregnant with Chloe. He was always bringing her gifts, expensive ones. I thought, God, I was such a fool. I thought he was just being a generous brother. Uncle Mark's voice cracked. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope with trembling hands. I had to know. After your post, I just had to know. The DNA test results were printed on official laboratory letterhead. My uncle had collected hair samples from all 3 of them, himself, Chloe, and my father. The results were unequivocal. Uncle Mark's genetic match to Chloe showed only an uncle's relationship, 84%, while my father showed a 99.99% paternal match. Sarah confessed everything today, he whispered. 25 years. They've been having an affair for 25 years. Since before Chloe was even conceived. We sat there until well past midnight, piecing together memories that suddenly made horrifying sense. The special treatment, the excessive gifts, the way my father always seemed to know about Chloe's life before anyone else. All those times he'd insisted on driving Aunt Sarah to doctor's appointments when she was pregnant. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," Uncle Mark said as he was leaving. "I should have seen it. Should have known." I watched him walk to his car in the rain, his shoulders hunched with the weight of 2 decades of betrayal. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt no satisfaction in being right. The morning after Uncle Mark's visit changed everything. I was still processing our conversation when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Sophia, your uncle just left. We need to talk. Can you meet me at Rosemary's Cafe in an hour?" I found her already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking like she hadn't slept. Her hands were wrapped around an untouched cup of coffee, and I noticed they were shaking slightly. "I've filed for divorce," she said before I could even sit down. "I just came from the lawyer's office." Her voice cracked. 25 years of marriage, and I never knew. Never wanted to know, maybe. Uncle Mark had told her everything, the DNA test results, Aunt Sarah's confession, the decades-long affair. He'd filed for divorce too, unable to stay married to a woman who'd lived such a profound lie. "Sophia," Mom reached across the table and grabbed my hands. Her eyes were brimming with tears. "I owe you the biggest apology. All these years, I defended him. I sided with him. I watched him favor Chloe and told myself it was nothing. I should have listened to you. Should have seen what was happening in my own home." "Mom." "No, let me finish. When you posted about your suspicions, I was so angry. I thought you were trying to hurt us, trying to get revenge. But you were the only one brave enough to say what we all should have seen. We spent hours in that cafe, crying, talking, beginning the slow process of healing. Mom ordered a bottle of wine, and we shared it as she told me about all the signs she'd ignored over the years, all the moments that suddenly made terrible sense. Later that evening, I was at home trying to process everything that had happened when someone started pounding on my door. I opened it to find Dad standing there, his face purple with rage. "Are you happy now?" he shouted, pushing past me into my apartment. "You've destroyed everything. 2 families, destroyed because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." "I destroyed nothing," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice was. "You did this. 25 years ago, you made a choice that would destroy these families. I just exposed the truth." His face twisted. "Well, I won't be at your wedding." "How's that for truth?" "I wasn't planning to invite you," I said quietly. "You haven't been a real father to me in years." "Then it's settled," he snarled. "You're no longer my daughter." A strange calm settled over me. "That's fine," I smiled. "You have another daughter anyway, don't you?" The look of shock on his face was almost comical. Before he could respond, I opened the door and gestured for him to leave. When he did, I closed it firmly behind him, leaving him standing in the hallway. That evening, I called Uncle Mark. My hands were trembling slightly as I dialed his number. "Uncle Mark, I have something to ask you." I took a deep breath. "Would you walk me down the aisle at my wedding?" There was a long pause, and I heard him clear his throat several times before he could speak. "Sophia, I would be honored." 2 months passed in a blur of wedding preparations. The guest list was shorter than originally planned, but somehow that made it more special. Every person who attended had chosen truth over comfortable lies, had stood by me when it would have been easier to look the other way. The garden venue was beautiful, scattered with white roses and peonies. Mom sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. When Uncle Mark took my arm to walk me down the aisle, I saw tears in his eyes too. The divorce proceedings between my parents moved surprisingly quickly. Mom told me later that Dad agreed to everything just to get it over with, perhaps hoping to minimize the scandal. They settled out of court, and Mom received a $200,000 settlement. I was in my rented apartment, surrounded by wedding thank you cards I was writing, when Mom came to visit one afternoon. "I want you to have this," she said, sliding an envelope across my coffee table. Inside was a check for the full settlement amount. "I don't need this money. What I need is for my daughter to have the home she deserves." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "Consider it compensation for all the years I failed to stand up for you." "You didn't fail." "I did, but we're fixing things now." She smiled. "Besides, what better way to use his money than to finally give you what he should have given you years ago?" I won't pretend I didn't cry when I deposited that check. Or when Michael and I found the perfect apartment, a beautiful 3-bedroom with a balcony and enough space to start the family we're hoping for. Every time I unlock our front door, I feel a sense of justice being served. Dad and Aunt Sarah got married last month. I heard about it through the family grapevine. Apparently, they didn't even wait for the ink to dry on their respective divorce papers. They're not hiding their relationship anymore. Their social media is full of happy couples photos, as if the past 25 years of deception never happened. I don't follow their accounts. I don't need to. Most of our relatives sided with Mom and me once the DNA results became public knowledge. Even those who initially defended Dad couldn't ignore the evidence. Uncle Mark comes over for dinner every Sunday now. He's dating again, tentatively stepping back into life after the betrayal. Mom joins us often, and watching them heal together, sister-in-law and brother-in-law bonded by shared pain, has been beautiful. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Chloe. About the fact that she's technically my half-sister. I wonder if she knew, if she ever suspected the truth behind our father's favoritism. But those thoughts don't keep me awake anymore. I have my own life now, my own home, my own family, built on honesty instead of secrets.